The bonfire threw shadows across 3,000 faces, and every one of them was watching the Alpha King press his mouth to the mark on Sanara's throat. She stood on the proving stone at the center of the great amphitheater of Astron Vale, barefoot on granite that had held the feet of queens for 9 centuries. The night sky above was cloudless. The torches along the upper rim burned so bright the amphitheater looked like a bowl of captured stars. And the roar of the assembled wolves, every pack leader, every elder, every warrior and healer and common wolf who had traveled from the furthest reaches of the kingdom, shook the ancient stone beneath her feet. Before these witnesses, Dravain spoke against her skin, his voice carrying across the silence that had fallen like a blade. I declare this woman my bonded mate, my equal, my queen. His teeth grazed the claiming mark he had given her 3 months ago in the privacy of his chambers, when they had been nothing more than 2 wolves who had found each other against all expectation. The mark flared with heat at the touch of his lips, sending warmth flooding through her chest. The crowd erupted, thousands of wolves howling in unison, a wall of raw, primal joy that vibrated in her bones. Warriors stamped their feet. Elders bared their teeth in fierce approval. Children perched on their parents' shoulders threw handfuls of crushed silvervine into the air, the traditional blessing for a new queen. And Dravain, the Alpha King of Astron Vale, the most powerful wolf born in 6 generations, lifted his head and looked at her with amber eyes that held nothing but absolute devotion. "My heart," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Now they all know what I have known since the moment I first caught your scent across a crowded market square." Sanara's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. She was a commoner with no bloodline, no political value, and no army of brothers or treasury of gold. The council had fought Dravain's choice for months, presenting candidate after candidate from noble houses whose daughters had been groomed for this exact purpose. He had refused them all. "You will make enemies tonight," she had warned him that morning. "The noble houses will never accept a commoner as queen." Dravain had crossed the room in 3 strides and taken her face in his hands. "Let them rage. I did not become Alpha King by bowing to the preferences of lesser wolves. You are my mate. The bond chose you. I chose you. And tonight, every soul in this kingdom will hear it from my own lips." Now, standing on the proving stone with his declaration echoing off the amphitheater walls, Sanara allowed herself to believe it was real. That this impossible, terrifying, magnificent thing was actually happening. But not every voice in the amphitheater joined the celebration. Near the eastern archway, half concealed by shadow, a woman in silver silk watched the ceremony with eyes the color of winter ice. Ivara, of House Kelmorthen, daughter of the most powerful noble family in Astron Vale, commander of 2,000 wolves who controlled the mountain passes and trade routes. The woman Dravain had rejected. Sanara did not see her. Did not see the figure who approached Ivara's shadow and pressed a folded note into her palm. Did not see the smile that spread across Ivara's face, a smile that had nothing to do with joy and everything to do with patience. That night, the kingdom feasted. Sanara sat beside Dravain at the high table, his hand resting on her thigh beneath the table in a gesture so possessive and tender it made her pulse stutter. "You are quiet," he observed. "My queen should be celebrating." "Your queen is trying not to faint," Sanara admitted. "I keep expecting someone to announce this was all a mistake." He kissed her then, in full view of the entire kingdom, and the wolves nearest the high table howled their approval. But even as Sanara melted into the warmth of his mouth, she felt a prickle at the base of her skull. A whisper of wrongness that slithered through the celebration like smoke. She pulled back and glanced toward the eastern archway. The column where Ivara had stood was empty. She would remember this moment later, in the darkest hours of her exile, and wonder if things might have been different if she had listened to the warning her instincts had tried to give her. If she had understood that the most dangerous enemies are the ones who smile while they sharpen their knives. 6 weeks later, Sanara's world ended in the space of a single overheard conversation. She had been in the healing gardens behind the castle, harvesting moonroot for the tonic she brewed each morning to settle her stomach. The nausea had started 10 days ago, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. She had not yet told Dravain. She wanted to be certain before she gave him news that would change everything. A child. Their child. Growing inside her while the kingdom still debated whether she deserved the crown. She was reaching for a cluster of moonroot when she heard voices drifting through the garden wall. Dravain's voice, and Ivara's. Something in Ivara's tone, low and intimate, and threaded with an emotion Sanara could not identify, rooted her feet to the ground. "You cannot keep pretending, Dravain." Ivara's voice was silk over steel. "The council is losing patience. My father's wolves grow restless. You made your public gesture, but we both know this cannot last. Watch your words, Ivara. You speak of my queen. I speak of a commoner you elevated to ease your guilt. Tell me I am wrong." Silence. 3 heartbeats. 4. 5. "You are wrong," Dravain said. But his voice had changed. The iron certainty she knew so well had softened into something that sounded almost like hesitation. "Am I? Then why did you summon me here tonight? Why did you send Corwith to my chambers with a private invitation, if not because there are things you cannot say in front of her?" Sanara's blood turned to ice. Dravain had summoned Ivara privately. He had told Sanara he would be in council meetings all evening. "What I have to say concerns the Northern Alliance," Dravain replied. "Your father's withdrawal of support has consequences that affect the entire kingdom." Ivara laughed bitterly. "Do you truly believe in the bond? In fate choosing your mate? Or is that simply what you tell yourself? You chose with your body instead of your duty. And now a girl with no allies and no understanding of what it means to be queen plays at wearing a crown she did not earn." Another silence. Longer, this time. Then Dravain spoke, and the words drove through Sanara's chest like a blade of ice. "You are not entirely wrong. The situation with the Northern Alliance is more fragile than I anticipated. The Council has made their position clear. That I was reckless. That the declaration was premature. That I allowed personal feeling to compromise the security of the realm." The moonroot fell from her fingers. "The council wants me to consider a formal alliance with House Kelmorthen," he continued. "A political arrangement. The kind that involves a ceremony." Sanara's knees buckled. A bonding ceremony. With Ivara. 6 weeks. It had taken 6 weeks for the promises to crack. "And what of your bonded queen?" Ivara asked. "Sanara would remain under my protection. She would want for nothing. Except her mate. Except her crown. Except everything you promised her." "I am trying to save my kingdom, Ivara. Do you think this is easy? Do you think I want this?" Sanara did not hear Ivara's response. She was already running. The claiming mark burned with sudden vicious heat. Through the bond, she could feel a pulse of confusion. Dravain had sensed her distress. She stumbled into the servants' corridor and nearly collided with Agna, the old wolf attendant who had served her since her arrival at court. "Child, what has happened?" "I need to leave, tonight. Now." Agna's amber eyes searched her face. "The garden. You heard them." It was not a question. "But child, what you heard may not be what you think. The king is being maneuvered. House Kelmorthen has been orchestrating this pressure since the declaration. They want you to run. Then they will get what they want, because I will not stay in a castle where my mate discusses replacing me while I harvest herbs like a fool. Sanara, please, give me 1 hour. Let me speak to the king before you do something that cannot be undone." But Sanara was already shaking her head. One hand pressed to her belly where the secret she had planned to share tonight now felt like a wound. "He called me a complication, Agna. He told Ivara the council was right, that the declaration was premature, and that he was reckless. Those are not the words of a man being maneuvered. Those are the words of a man who has made his choice." She was already gone, running deeper into the servants' corridors. The old wolf turned and ran in the opposite direction, toward the king's study, her aged body moving with desperate speed. She did not make it in time. Sanara packed in the dark, 2 dresses, a woolen cloak lined with rabbit fur. her leather pouch of dried herbs, and a bone-handled knife her father had given her the day she left his tannery for the last time. For cutting leather, or cutting throats, he had said with his rough laugh, whatever the occasion demands. The claiming mark pulsed with heat. Through the bond, Dravain's confusion had sharpened into concern. He was looking for her, his attention sweeping through the castle like a searchlight, probing the bond for her location. She slipped through the servants' passages and out the southern gate, her scent masked by crushed silver leaf rubbed into her cloak. A healer's trick, learned from Agna in her first week at court. The forest closed around her within minutes. Ancient pines, their branches heavy with resin and damp earth. The moon hung low overhead, painting the forest floor in silver. She walked south with no destination, no plan beyond putting distance between herself and the man who had sworn before the kingdom that she was his everything, then whispered to another woman that she was a problem to be solved. The bond pulled tighter with every step. She could feel Dravain's panic now, wild and clawing. He was searching, calling her name through the bond in a way she had never felt before, raw and desperate and edged with fury directed not at her, but at himself. Good, she thought. Let him feel what it is like to reach for something and find it gone. But even as the bitter thought formed, tears were sliding down her cheeks. Beneath the anger and the betrayal, Sonara still loved him with a ferocity that made every step away from the castle feel like tearing her own chest open. Behind her, far behind but growing closer, a howl split the night. Raw, guttural. The howl of an alpha wolf in full fury, a sound that commanded every wolf within miles to stop moving and submit. He had shifted. He was hunting her. Sonara broke into a run. She veered toward the river. Water would mask her scent, would slow even an alpha's tracking. She burst through the tree line and nearly tumbled down the riverbank. The water was swollen with autumn rain, churning dark and fast over slick stones. Dangerous for a woman in her condition. Behind her, the crashing of undergrowth grew louder. She stepped into the river. The cold hit her like a fist. The current grabbed at her legs. She pushed forward, the water rising to her waist, her chest. She went under for a heartbeat and came up coughing, lungs burning. She reached the far bank and dragged herself out, soaked and shivering. She turned. Dravain stood on the opposite bank in human form, his massive frame heaving with exertion, his amber eyes blazing in the moonlight. Sonara, come back. 2 words, simple, desperate, stripped of every ounce of authority. In that moment, he was not a king. He was a man watching the woman he loved disappear. She shook her head. Whatever you heard, whatever you think happened, let me explain. Do not do this. You explained enough. You told Ivara everything I needed to hear. She saw the realization hit him, the exact moment he understood what she had overheard. That conversation was not what it sounded like. I was trying to buy time, to keep the Kelmorthans from withdrawing their forces. I would never... You called me a complication. The words hung between them over the dark water. I was speaking their language, playing their game. It was strategy, Sonara. It was never the truth. How am I supposed to know what is strategy and what is truth when you speak entirely different words in private to the woman who wants to take my place? For one agonizing moment, she wavered. The bond screamed at her to stay. But the woman who had learned the hard way that words from powerful men could not always be trusted shook her head one final time. If you chose me, then you would never have given her reason to believe there was still a choice to make. She turned and walked into the dark forest. Behind her, the Alpha King fell to his knees in the shallows. She did not see the tears that cut tracks through the mud on his face. And she did not hear the howl that erupted from his throat, a sound so shattered that wolves in villages 30 miles distant woke from sleep, overwhelmed by a grief that was not their own. By the time Dravain crossed the river, Sonara's scent had dissolved in the wet earth and running water. She was gone. And with her, the air he did not yet know existed. 7 months had passed since the night Sonara crossed the river, and the village of Dunhallow had no reason to suspect that the quiet young widow in the abandoned goatherd's cottage was anything other than what she claimed. She had arrived in the dead of winter, gaunt and hollow-eyed, her belly just beginning to show beneath an oversized cloak. She told the village elder, a grizzled wolf named Brennock who had lost most of his teeth and none of his shrewdness, that her mate had been killed by border raiders. That she had walked south for weeks seeking safety. That she had nothing to offer except her knowledge of herbs and healing. "You smell like grief," he had said. Real grief. Not the performed kind. Then he had given her the cottage and told her to make herself useful. Within a month, Sonara had become indispensable. She treated the blacksmith's infected hand with a poultice that saved his fingers. She brewed a tea that broke the fever plaguing the tanner's youngest boy. She sat with the village midwife through a difficult birth, her steady hands guiding the baby free when the cord wrapped twice around its neck. The villagers called her Nath, a common name, an invisible name, the kind no one would remember if royal wolves came asking questions. But inside, Sonara was not healing. The bond had not severed. When a mate rejected the bond, the connection was supposed to wither within weeks. The mark would fade. The pull would dissolve. Sonara's mark had not faded. It had grown more vivid, darkening from pale pink to deep silver, the color of a bond strengthening rather than breaking. It pulsed at unpredictable moments, when she was grinding herbs at dawn, when she walked through the forest at twilight, when she lay in bed with her hands curved around her swelling belly, feeling the baby shift and tumble. And sometimes, in the thin hours between midnight and dawn, she felt him. Not his presence exactly. Something less defined, but no less real. A searching, restless energy that swept across the bond like fingers running over a locked door, probing for a way in. She kept the door shut. She had rebuilt herself from the wreckage of that night by the river, one painful day at a time, and she would not let the ghost of what they had been tear down what she was building. But the dreams were harder to control. In the dreams, Dravain found her cottage and knelt before her and pressed his hands to her belly and wept without sound. She always woke from those dreams with her face wet and her mark blazing. "You are carrying this child with too much sorrow," the village midwife told her one afternoon, pressing practiced hands against Sonara's stomach. "A baby feels what its mother feels. This one is restless, anxious." She paused, frowning. "And this blood runs hot. Very hot. I have not felt a child move with such force since the last time I attended a birth of royal blood." Sonara's heart slammed against her ribs. "I am not of royal blood." "No," the midwife agreed, "but the father might have been." That night, as Sonara lay awake feeling the baby kick with a ferocity that bordered on violent, she wondered how much longer her false name and false history could hold. The child was not just hers. The child was the Alpha King's heir. And no amount of distance, no false name, no lonely cottage at the edge of a forgotten village could change the blood that ran through its veins. The traders came on a gray morning in early spring, their wagons heavy with salt and iron and news from the capital. Sonara was in the village square when young Phelan came sprinting between the market stalls with the breathless urgency of a 12-year-old who has discovered that the world contains drama. "Mistress Nath, have you heard? The Alpha King has lost his mind." The sack of flour she was holding split across the cobblestones. Phelan rushed on with enthusiastic authority. "The traders say he has not held court in months. He shifts into wolf form and runs through the forests for days without eating or sleeping. He attacked 3 of his own advisors when they tried to reason with him." Sonara knelt to gather the spilled flour, using the motion to hide her trembling hands. "The affairs of kings are none of our concern, Phelan. But that is not the worst part. The Kelmorthans have closed the mountain routes. No trade, no communication. The mountain villages are starving, and Lord Kelmorthan is gathering an army. They say a challenge for the throne is coming." A challenge, in the old law, fought to the death. And Dravain, if the rumors were true, had spent 7 months destroying himself in search of a woman who did not want to be found. He would be weakened, exhausted, vulnerable, the perfect target. After the boy had gone, Sanara sat alone in her cottage with a cup of tea she did not drink. He was searching for her, all these months, and he had not stopped. The rational part of her mind constructed explanations. Pride. A king could not allow his declared queen to simply vanish. Possession. She bore his mark. Politics. Her disappearance made him look weak, and weakness invited challengers. But the bond told a different story. It pulsed with desperation, with longing so acute it woke her from sleep and left her gasping. With a grief that mirrored her own so perfectly it was impossible to tell where his pain ended and hers began. What if Agna was right? What if the conversation was strategy, not betrayal? What if she had done exactly what the Kelmorthans wanted? The questions followed her through the rest of the day, settling into the hollow spaces between her ribs like stones she could not cough up. She had been so certain when she crossed the river, so sure that leaving was the only act of dignity left to her. But certainty, she was learning, could be its own kind of blindness. That night, movement at the edge of the forest caught her attention through the window. A large wolf standing between the pines, its muzzle pointed directly at her cottage. Not a wild wolf. Wild wolves did not stand that still, did not watch with that level of fixed, intelligent attention. Its posture was rigid, alert, its ears forward. Two more shapes materialized from the deeper forest, flanking the first, forming a loose perimeter. Watching, waiting. The mark on her throat erupted with heat so intense she cried out. Through the bond, she felt something lurch. A distant predator lifting its head, catching a scent it had been hunting for months. His wolves, his scouts. The advance guard of a search that had consumed a kingdom. Sanara pulled the curtain shut with trembling hands. It was only a matter of time before he followed. The knock came 2 days later. Sanara had spent the intervening hours in suspended terror, calculating routes south, measuring the distance to the border against the limitations of her body. 8 months pregnant and alone. She would not make it 20 miles before the wolves ran her down. The knock was firm, but not aggressive. 3 measured raps, the kind a person makes when they want to convey authority without threat. Sanara opened the door with her father's knife behind her back. Corwith, Dravain's first beta, his closest advisor. The man who had stood at the king's right hand through every crisis of the last decade. Mistress Nath, Corwith said, and the false name sounded almost gentle in his measured voice. Or should I say Sanara, maid of the Alpha King, bearer of the royal mark, and the most hunted woman in 5 kingdoms. If you have come to drag me back, you should know I will take your hand off at the wrist before you touch me. The ghost of something that might have been admiration crossed Corwith's face. I have not come to drag you anywhere. I have come to tell you the truth, and to warn you that the truth may be the only thing that saves your life. She led him inside. He took in her cottage with a single sweep. The drying herbs, the narrow bed, the evidence of a woman living on the thin edge of survival. What you heard in that garden, Corwith said quietly, was a script, written by Ivara and her father. Fed to the king's advisors as a recommended diplomatic approach, Dravain was told that the only way to prevent Lord Kelmorthan from withdrawing his army was to offer Ivara the appearance of hope. Not a genuine offer. A performance designed to buy time while we fortified the eastern border. And he had no choice but to dismiss me as an inconvenience as part of this performance. He should not have used those words. He knows it. I told him so to his face. But Lord Kelmorthan had given an ultimatum. Withdraw the declaration within 30 days, or the Kelmorthan army pulls out of the passes. Without those passes, Eastern Raider clans would pour into our territory within a week. Thousands would die. So I was sacrificed for strategy. You were protected by strategy. The conversation was designed to stall Kelmorthan, while Dravain repositioned our forces to hold the passes without Kelmorthan support. He was never going to bond with Ivara, never going to set you aside. The entire plan was built around keeping you exactly where you were, as his queen, on his throne, with his mark on your throat. Sonara sank into the chair beside the hearth. Her hands were shaking. He was going to tell you everything that night, Corwith continued. He came to your chambers with the full truth prepared and found you gone. Your clothes taken. Your scent trail leading toward the southern gate. He paused. I have served Dravain for 12 years. I have seen him face armies, treachery, and assassination attempts without flinching. I have never seen him break the way he broke that night. Do not ask me to pity him. I am not asking pity. I am telling you what has happened since you left. Kelmorthen declared the bonding fraudulent the moment you vanished. He claimed that Dravain's inability to hold his own mate proved the bond was false. He withdrew his army and began rallying the packs to his banner. Corwith reached into his coat and withdrew a folded square of treated hide, the traditional medium for messages too sensitive for paper. Sonara read it. Then again. The tanner's whelp has been traced to a village called Dunhallow. She is heavy with child. Eliminate both before the king's scouts locate her. Make it look like bandits. The hide fell from her fingers. Lord Kelmorthen does not want you found, Corwith said. You are the only living proof that the bond is real. If you return, every argument he has built collapses. So he has chosen the simpler option. He paused. And the killers he sent could already be here. The baby kicked hard beneath her ribs. Dravain does not know exactly where I am. I have not told him. His arrival with a war party would have alerted the Kelmorthens. I came alone. But the bond is guiding him. He feels you through the mark. He says the pull has been growing stronger for weeks. As if to confirm his words, the mark on her throat flared with warmth. A sound from outside made them both freeze. Not the wind. Not an animal. The sharp snap of a branch broken underfoot. The kind of sound a person makes when they want to be heard. Through the window, shapes moved between the trees. Not the dark gray scouts from 2 nights ago. Larger. Moving in tight military formation. And they were circling the cottage from 3 sides. How many exits? Corwith asked, his voice suddenly flat and professional. Front door, and a back window to the goat pen. Then we use the window. Can you run? Sonara looked down at her swollen belly. Nearly due. Exhausted. Terrified. I can do whatever I have to do, she said. The front door shuddered under the first blow. The door held for exactly 3 seconds. Corwith grabbed Sonara and hauled her toward the back window as the entrance exploded inward. 2 wolves in shifted form lunged through the wreckage, their eyes flat with the detachment of professionals who killed for coin rather than conviction. Corwith shifted mid-stride, his lean body ripped apart to reveal a wolf the color of storm clouds, all coiled muscle and bared teeth. He met the first attacker in the center of the cottage, jaws locking around its throat with a crack that sent blood spraying across Sonara's drying herbs. Go! Window! Now! Sonara grabbed her cloak, shoved the knife into her belt, and threw herself through the back window. The frame caught her hip, her swollen belly making the passage agonizing, but she tumbled into the goat pen and rolled to her feet with a speed born of pure adrenaline. She ran, one arm beneath her belly, the other pushing through undergrowth. The baby was frantic inside her, kicking and twisting as if responding to the danger its mother could not escape. She made it 50 yards before the third wolf found her. It burst through bracken with jaws already open. Sonara screamed and threw herself sideways, hitting the ground hard enough to drive the breath from her lungs. The wolf overshot, its claws raking the earth where she had stood. It turned. Its amber eyes locked on her with cold assessment. Her hand found the knife at her belt. The wolf lunged. She rolled onto her back and drove the blade upward with both hands. The knife caught the wolf beneath the jaw, sinking deep into soft tissue. Hot blood poured over her hands, her arms, her chest. The wolf collapsed on top of her, its massive weight crushing the air from her lungs. She screamed and shoved the dying animal aside, scrambling to her feet, drenched in blood, the knife still clutched in her shaking fist. Then a howl of pain rose from her cottage. Corwith stumbled between the trees in human form, one arm hanging at a wrong angle, blood sheeting down his face. Behind him, 2 more wolves were advancing, stepping over a body Corwith had already killed. He had fought 4 wolves alone and taken 2 down. But the remaining pair were fresh, and Corwith was broken. Sonara reached for the bond, not to feel Dravain. She reached for the bond itself, the living thread connecting her to the most powerful wolf in 5 kingdoms. She grabbed it with everything she had, every ounce of fear and fury and desperate maternal ferocity, and she pulled. The mark on her throat detonated. Silver light erupted from the claiming scar so bright it turned the forest to noon. The advancing wolves yelped and recoiled. Corwith threw his unbroken arm across his face, and somewhere to the north, she felt an answering explosion of power that shook the bond like a struck bell. He knew exactly where she was, but he was not here yet. Sonara stepped in front of Corwith. "Get behind me." "You are 8 months pregnant," Corwith gasped, "and you have 1 working arm. Get behind me." The wolves charged. She raised her father's knife and braced herself, knowing she could not survive this, knowing she would fight anyway because her father had raised her to cut leather or cut throats, and the occasion demanded the latter. The first wolf was 3 strides away when the forest exploded. Trees snapped like dry bones. The ground shook. A roar filled the air, the full-throated fury of an alpha unleashed from every restraint of civilization and reason. A shape erupted from the tree line so fast it was barely visible. Black fur, massive frame, eyes blazing not amber but molten gold, lit from within by rage that bordered on supernatural. Dravain hit the first wolf like a battering ram. The impact sent the wolf's body cartwheeling through the air before striking an oak with a crack that silenced the forest. The second wolf turned to flee. It made 4 steps before Dravain's jaws closed around its hindquarters. When it was over, the Alpha King stood in a clearing painted in blood. His golden eyes swept the tree line, hunting for more threats. Finding none, those eyes turned to Sonara. The massive black wolf approached her 1 slow step at a time. Each paw placement deliberate, careful, as if the most dangerous wolf in the known world was afraid the pregnant woman with the knife might run from him again. He stopped 3 feet away. His great head lowered until his muzzle was level with her belly. He inhaled deeply, and a shudder passed through his entire body. The baby kicked. A single sharp movement toward its father's nose. The Alpha King of Astronvale made a sound no one would ever have associated with a creature of such devastating power. He whimpered. Sonara's knife hand dropped to her side. The shift happened between one breath and the next. A man now knelt in the blood-soaked earth. Trembling. His amber eyes fixed on her belly with an expression of overwhelming revelation. "You are carrying my child," Dravain whispered. "You have been carrying my child this entire time." She could see what the months had done to him. His face was gaunt, cheekbones standing out like blades beneath skin that had lost all color. His eyes were ringed with shadows so deep they looked like bruises. His body, once a monument of controlled power, was wasted and lean. He looked like a man who had been dying. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because I was going to tell you that night. The night I heard you in the garden. I had practiced the words. I was going to take your hand and press it here." She touched her belly. "And instead, I heard you discuss replacing me with the woman who had been sharpening her claws for my throat since the day I arrived." Dravain's face crumpled. The expression was not grief. It was the look of a man who has just understood the full dimension of what he has lost. "I was never going to replace you. Corwith told you the truth. Every word I spoke to Ivara was calculated to keep her father's army in the passes long enough to fortify the eastern border. You could have told me that before you met with her in secret." "I should have. I should have trusted you with the full picture instead of trying to shield you from court politics. That was my failure, Sonara. Mine." Sonara stared at the man kneeling in the mud and felt the war inside her chest reach its breaking point. 7 months. 7 months of grief so heavy it had bent her spine. 7 months of telling herself that leaving was strength, that the pain would eventually fade. It had not faded. It had calcified. "You let me believe I was disposable," she said, and the words came out quiet, which was worse than shouting. Shouting could be dismissed as hysteria. Quiet could not be dismissed as anything but truth. You stood on the proving stone and told the kingdom I was your mate, your equal, your queen. 6 weeks later, you sat in a private courtyard with the woman your council wanted you to choose and told her the council was right, that you were reckless, that I was a complication. Words designed to keep her father from withdrawing his army. Words you chose to speak. Words you could have refused. Sanara's voice trembled. Do you have any idea what it feels like to hear the person who claimed your soul describe you as a complication to the woman who wants to take your place? Yes, because I have spent 7 months imagining exactly how those words sounded to you. Every time I hear my own voice saying them, I want to tear my own throat out. That is not good enough. I know. Knowing is not good enough either. Dravain's hands clenched in the dirt. Then tell me what is. Tell me what I have to destroy or build or sacrifice to make you believe that I never, for one heartbeat, stopped choosing you. You cannot say anything. That is the point. Words are what got us here. Your words on the proving stone. Your words in the garden. I am drowning in your words, Dravain, and I cannot tell which ones are real. Then he did something she did not expect. He tilted his head and bared his throat. Not the casual gesture of a wolf showing deference, the full exposure. Chin raised, neck stretched, pulse point offered to the open air. Among wolves, the most profound act of submission. A wolf who bared its throat, placed its life entirely in the other's hands. An alpha king had not bared his throat to anyone in living memory. Then I will stop talking, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I will show you. However long it takes, whatever it costs. I will show you that the man who spoke to Ivora was playing a part he despised, and I will show you that the man who knelt before you in the amphitheater is the only version of me that has ever been real. The bond pulsed with heat so intense that Sanara gasped. Through the silver thread she felt everything he was feeling. Not in words, in raw, unfiltered sensation. The long months of agony, the nights running in wolf form until his paws bled. The moment he had woken 3 days ago with the bond blazing and known she was alive and afraid. She felt his terror when he had heard her scream in the forest, his wolf obliterating every rational thought in a tidal wave of protective fury, the single, consuming imperative. Get to her. Get to her. Get to her. And beneath all of it, something so simple and overwhelming it nearly drove her to her knees. Love. Not the poetic love of the declaration ceremony. This was messy and desperate and ugly with suffering. A man hollowed out by the absence of one person who would burn the rest of the world to ashes if it meant standing in her presence for 5 more minutes. I cannot forgive you yet, Sanara whispered. I am not asking for forgiveness. I am asking for the chance to earn it. Behind them, Corwith stirred. My king. There may be more assassins. We need to move. The moment fractured. Dravain rose, the vulnerable man replaced by the calculating predator who had held a throne for a decade. How many attacked? He asked. 6. I killed 2. Your mate killed 1. You killed the other 3. Corwith paused. Your mate killed 1. Dravain's gaze returned to Sanara, to the blood on her hands, to the blade at her belt. A commoner with a knife, he said softly, and something fierce and proud moved through his eyes. She did not smile, but she did not look away either. We need to get Corwith to shelter, she said. His arm is broken and that gash needs stitching. Then you are going to tell me everything. Not the version you think I can handle. Everything. Dravain nodded once. Everything. He reached for her hand. She did not take it. But she did not step away. And for now, standing in a clearing full of dead wolves with his child kicking beneath her ribs, that was enough. They traveled north through the night. Sanara on the horse Corwith had ridden from the capital, Dravain walking beside her in human form with one hand resting on her knee. Corwith rode behind them, his broken arm bound to his chest, his face gray with pain despite Sanara's field dressing. Around them, wolves materialized from the darkness. Dozens, silent and massive, falling into formation without command. Dravain's wolves, the ones who had been scouring the countryside for months in search of their king's mate. They moved like shadows, forming a living perimeter around the small column. Dravain talked as they rode. He talked until his voice was hoarse, and then he talked some more. He told her about the night she vanished, how he had come to their chambers with a bottle of blackberry wine and a speech prepared, the full truth. How he had opened the door to an empty room and felt the bond stretch taut, and then begin to scream. He told her about the search. The first 3 days spent entirely in wolf form, running the southern forests until his body gave out, and he collapsed on a riverbank and had to be carried back to the castle by his guards. The scouts sent to every village, every border crossing. The rewards offered, the threats made. The alliances burned when pack leaders refused to cooperate. He told her about Ivara. She came to me the morning after you disappeared. She said your flight proved the bond was unstable, that a true mate would have trusted her alpha instead of running. She offered herself as a replacement. What did you say? I told her that if she or any Kelmorthan spoke your name in my presence again, I would consider it a declaration of war. He paused. In retrospect, that may have accelerated their plans. As dawn broke over the ridge ahead, Sanara got her first look at the kingdom she had fled. Something was very wrong. The valley should have been green with early spring. Instead, the fields were brown and dead. Smoke rose from a dozen points, not cooking fires, but structures burning. And above the castle, where Dravain's banner should have flown, a different standard snapped in the morning wind. The silver mountain wolf of House Kelmorthan. Dravain went perfectly still. Corwith rode up beside them, his face ashen. It happened 2 days ago. Lord Kelmorthan declared you mentally unfit and invoked the old law of sovereign removal. Half the guard defected. The rest were overwhelmed. My people. The wolves who refused to submit. Kelmorthan has taken hostages. 43 wolves scheduled for execution at sundown today. The charge is treason. Sanara's stomach dropped. Including Agna. The name hit her like a blow. Agna, who had tried to stop her from running, who had begged for 1 hour, who had spent 7 months in a castle controlled by enemies and refused to bend the knee even when the walls fell around her. We have to save them, Sanara said. You have been running and fighting and bleeding for hours. I will not let you walk into a castle held by the man who sent assassins to murder you and our child. And I will not sit on a hillside and watch 43 wolves die because they were loyal to us. Agna tried to save me that night. I did not listen. I will not abandon her now. Through the bond, she could feel his wolf raging against the idea. Every instinct screaming to carry her somewhere safe. But he also felt what she felt. The iron refusal to let others pay for the choices she had made. The stubbornness that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. Together, he said finally. But you stay behind the front line. You do not enter the castle until Kelmorthan is dealt with. Sanara did not agree. She did not disagree either. And Dravain, beginning to understand that his mate's silences were far more dangerous than her arguments, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. They reached the castle walls by midday. Dravain's wolves had swelled to nearly 200 during the march, loyal wolves emerging from hiding across the countryside. But the castle held over 1,000 Kelmorthan soldiers, and its walls were designed to withstand siege. A frontal assault would be a bloodbath. Dravain crouched behind the ridgeline with his war council, sketching approaches in the dirt. Corwith leaned over the crude map with his good arm. A scarred female named Thandris suggested the sewage tunnels beneath the north wall, and emerged directly beneath 1,000 hostile soldiers. Dravain shook his head. We need a distraction. Something that pulls Kelmorthan's attention to one point while we strike at another. Sanara listened from her position 10 yards behind the war council, where Dravain had stationed her with 2 guards and explicit instructions not to move. She listened to plan after plan being proposed and rejected. She listened to the sun descending toward the horizon, toward sundown, toward the execution of 43 wolves. And she made a decision. She did not think about it. Thinking would have meant calculating the odds, and the odds were a death sentence. She simply stood, walked past her guards with the calm authority of a woman who expected to be obeyed, and descended the ridge toward the castle gate. The ground was uneven beneath her feet. Her belly pulled at her balance with every step. Behind her, she heard one of the guards call her name, then the scramble of boots on loose rock as they sprinted after her. By the time they reached her, she was already within shouting distance of the walls. "I am Sinara, maid of the Alpha King, bearer of his mark and his heir. I am requesting an audience with Lord Kelmorthen." A face appeared above the battlements. Silver-haired, sharp-featured, mouth curved in the satisfied smile of a predator watching prey walk into the trap. Lord Halverson Kelmorthen. The runaway returns, and in such a delicate condition. His eyes moved to her belly. "Does the king know you are here?" Behind her, a sound that might have been the beginning of Dravain's scream before Corwith clamped a hand over his mouth. "I have come to offer a trade. You have 43 hostages of no political value. They are liabilities, not leverage. I am leverage. Release them all. In exchange, I enter the castle willingly." "Sinara, no!" Dravain's voice tore across the ridge. She did not turn, could not turn. If she looked at him now, her courage would shatter. Kelmorthen studied her. "You realize the moment you are inside these walls, the king cannot touch me without risking your life. I realize that. And you would do this. For servants and old women. For people who were loyal to us when loyalty carried a death sentence." "Yes." Kelmorthen laughed. A genuine laugh, rich with amusement that made her skin crawl. "Foolish, but brave. Very well. I accept your terms." He gestured behind the wall. The minutes that followed were the longest of Sinara's life. She stood in the open ground before the gate, exposed, her hands clasped beneath her belly, while the sounds of chains being struck and bolts being drawn echoed from inside the walls. Then the gate creaked open and a stream of battered, terrified wolves stumbled out into the daylight. Sinara counted. 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. The last was Agna, bruised, wrists raw from bindings, but her amber eyes fierce and unbroken. "You stubborn, reckless, magnificent child," Agna whispered. "Get them to safety. Dravain's wolves are on the ridge." Agna grabbed her hand. "Do not go in there. He will kill you." Sinara smiled, a terrible smile, full of fear and resolve, and something that looked almost like peace. "He will try." She freed her hand gently and walked through the gate. The iron portcullis dropped behind her with a sound like the closing of a tomb. The great hall of Astronvale had been transformed, Dravain's banners torn down and replaced with Kelmorthen silver. Long tables overturned as barricades. Armed wolves lining every alcove, every doorway, every shadowed corner. On the stolen throne sat Lord Kelmorthen, with Ivara at his shoulder. Ivara looked at Sinara's belly and something ugly moved through her ice-blue eyes. The commoner bred before she ran. How common? Sinara ignored her. Her attention was fixed on Kelmorthen. "You are either very brave or very stupid," he said. "I have not decided which. I am a mother protecting her child, which makes me something far more dangerous than either." "Dangerous? You are a pregnant commoner alone in a room full of my soldiers. What danger could you possibly represent?" "The danger of truth. I am the living proof that your justification for this coup is a lie. You told the kingdom the bond was false, that the ceremony was a fraud, that his obsession with a missing woman proved he was unfit to rule." Sinara placed both hands on her belly. "But I am standing here, Lord Kelmorthen, alive, marked, carrying his heir. The bond is real. The ceremony was valid. And every wolf in this kingdom will know it the moment they see me." Kelmorthen's smile faltered. "Which is why she cannot be allowed to leave," Ivara said. She descended from the dais, drawing a blade with a faint green sheen, wolfsbane extract. A tragic accident. The unstable girl attacked the new sovereign and had to be put down. Such a shame about the baby. Several soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Killing a pregnant woman sat poorly with wolves whose deepest instincts commanded the protection of mothers and unborn young. Ivara raised the poisoned blade, and the baby moved. Not a kick. A surge of energy that started in her womb and radiated outward through every vein, every nerve, every cell. Hot and fierce and ancient, carrying a sound only Sonara could hear. The sound of a wolf cub howling for its father. The bond on her throat ignited. Silver light exploded from the claiming mark. Soldiers stumbled backward. Ivara froze mid-stride, and Sonara felt her body begin to change. She had never shifted, had never felt the call of the wolf. She was a woman with no bloodline, no right to the transformation that defined their kind. But the child inside her was not common, the product of a true mate bond, the first in 3 generations. Its power poured into its mother with the force of a river breaking through a dam. Sonara screamed as her bones reshaped. Every joint cracked and reformed. Silver-white fur pushed through her skin, her spine arched, her jaw extended. Even as her body transformed, a cocoon of warmth and light wrapped around the baby, the cub using its own nascent power to shield itself while it gave its mother the strength to survive. Where a pregnant woman had stood, a wolf now crouched on the stones of the great hall. Fur the color of starlight, eyes blazing amber. Smaller than a warrior wolf, but vibrating with power that made the stones hum. Ivara screamed and plunged the blade downward. The great hall doors detonated. Dravain came through the wreckage in full wolf form, a black avalanche of fury, 200 wolves pouring behind him. He crossed the hall in 3 bounds and hit Ivara before the blade could descend, sending her spinning across the stone floor. He planted himself in front of Sonara, a wall of black fur between his mate and every threat in the room. Chaos erupted, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. Half the Kelmorthan wolves threw down their weapons the moment they saw Sonara in shifted form. They could feel the bond radiating from her and Dravain, a wave of undeniable truth that washed away months of Kelmorthan propaganda. One by one, the soldiers knelt. Kelmorthan made one final desperate play. He drew a ceremonial sword from behind the throne and charged directly at Sonara. She turned to face him, and from her throat came a howl unlike any she had ever heard, layered with harmonics, woven with silver light, amplified by the power of the unborn cub. The sound hit Kelmorthan like a physical force. His sword dropped, his hands flew to his ears as the howl spoke directly to his wolf. Submit. The command was not spoken, it was felt. Every wolf in the hall felt it, a compulsion so primal and absolute that even Dravain's wolves dropped their heads. Lord Halverson Kelmorthan fell to his knees on the stones of a throne room he had stolen and could not hold. Sonara shifted back to human form, one hand on her belly where the baby had stilled, exhausted by the power it had channeled. Dravain shifted beside her, said nothing, simply stood at her shoulder and waited. This was her moment, not his. Your daughter tried to murder me and my child. Your soldiers hunted me through the forests of a kingdom I was supposed to call home. You overthrew the rightful king and sentenced 43 wolves to death for the crime of loyalty. You are nothing, Kelmorthan spat. A commoner, a nobody. Sonara looked at him for a long moment. Perhaps not. But I earned it. She turned to Dravain. Your kingdom, your justice. Halverson Kelmorthan, you are charged with treason, attempted regicide, conspiracy to murder the queen and the royal heir, and the unlawful imprisonment and attempted execution of 43 wolves of the realm. You will face trial before the assembled packs. Then, in front of every wolf in the great hall, the Alpha King bared his throat. My mate, he said, my queen, my heart. He pressed his lips to the silver mark on her throat. The bond blazed between them, and Sonara felt it finally, fully lock into place. Not the strained, screaming thread of separation. This was completion. Two souls recognizing each other with such force that the stones beneath their feet trembled. Through the bond, she felt everything. The night of the garden through his eyes. The self-loathing as he spoke words he did not mean. The speech he had prepared. The full truth. That he had carried to empty chambers only to find her gone. The months of searching. His wolf howling every night through stone walls. The moment the bond had flared and he had known, with the certainty of a man touching fire, exactly where she was. And what he felt now. Standing beside her in the ruins of a stolen throne room, his child safe inside her. Joy. Overwhelming. Annihilating. Savage joy. Sonara cupped his face in her hands. "I am still angry with you," she said. "I know. And I may be angry for a very long time. I will wait. But I am here, and I am not leaving again." Dravain closed his eyes. A tear slid down his cheek and caught in the stubble along his jaw. "That is enough," he whispered. "That is everything." Around them, the wolves of Astronvale began to howl. Not fractured, grieving howls. Something new. Something whole. The sound of a pack that had found its center again. The sound of wolves who had finally, at long last, come home. In the weeks that followed, the kingdom of Astronvale exhaled. Lord Kelmorthen and Ivara faced trial before the assembled packs in the same amphitheater where Dravain had once declared Sonara his queen. Kelmorthen was stripped of his titles, his lands, and his wolf. The ancient ritual of severance left him human, nothing more, a man without a pack, exiled to the salt flats beyond the southern border. Ivara received the same sentence. She screamed as the severance took hold. The sound was terrible. But not one wolf looked away. Some prices had to be witnessed to be understood. The kingdom healed slowly. The fields that had withered began to green again. The wolves who had grown erratic calmed as the completed bond radiated peace through the pack hierarchy. And Sonara, for the first time in her life, stopped running. Forgiveness was not a door that swung open with a single push. It was a path walked day by day, conversation by conversation, truth by painful truth. Dravain told her everything. Not just the Kelmorthen strategy, but every doubt. Every moment of weakness since realizing his mate was a woman with no political allies who would make his reign immeasurably harder. The advisors who had urged him to reject the bond. The guilt he carried forever, allowing those doubts to exist. And Sonara told him everything in return. The loneliness that had preceded the betrayal, the shame at every state dinner, every encounter with noble wolves who looked at her calloused hands and saw a commoner instead of a queen. The fear that Ivara's words had merely confirmed what she had always secretly believed, that she was not enough. Dravain took her hands and pressed them to his chest. These hands saved Corwith's life in a forest clearing. These hands killed a wolf that was trying to murder you and our child. These hands have healed the sick and brewed medicines from nothing but roots and knowledge. These are the hands of my queen. And any wolf who cannot see that does not deserve a place in our kingdom. The baby came on a night when the moon hung full and golden over Astronvale. Sonara labored for 6 hours while Dravain paced outside the birthing chamber, his wolf so close to the surface that his eyes flickered between amber and gold, with every muffled sound from behind the door. Agna was the one who finally opened the door. The old wolf's face, still bearing the fading bruises of her captivity, was split by a smile so wide it seemed to crack granite. "A boy," she announced. "Strong lungs, stronger grip. He grabbed my finger before I could clean him and would not let go." Dravain was through the door before she finished speaking. He found Sonara propped against the pillows, exhausted and radiant, with a small bundle cradled against her chest. The baby was red-faced and furious, tiny fists clenched, dark hair already thick against his scalp. And when Dravain touched his son's cheek with one trembling finger, the baby opened his eyes. Amber. Deep, clear, unmistakable amber, the eyes of the royal bloodline. The Alpha King of Astronvale sat on the edge of the bed and wept. Sinara watched him cry and felt the last wall inside her chest dissolve. Not because the tears proved his love. She had known his love was real since the night in the forest, since the moment he had knelt before her and bared his throat with desperate humility. The wall dissolved because she finally believed she deserved it. That a commoner with calloused hands and no bloodline could be worthy of a king's devotion. Not because he made her worthy, but because she had always been. "Let me hold him," Dravain whispered. She placed their son in his father's arms. The baby settled immediately, curling against Dravain's broad chest, his furious cries fading to soft, contented sounds. The bond between father and child was instantaneous, a flicker of silver light that passed between them like a whispered promise. "He has your stubbornness," Dravain murmured, cradling the boy with exaggerated care. He would not let go of Agna's finger. "He has your temper," Sinara replied. "He has been kicking me without mercy for months." Dravain pressed his forehead to hers. Through the bond she felt his gratitude, his wonder, his fierce and trembling joy. "Thank you," he said, "for coming back, for giving me the chance to earn what I almost lost." Sinara's hand came up to trace the mark on his throat, the scar her own teeth had left during the completion of their bond in the Great Hall. It matched the silver mark on her own throat, twin declarations written in skin and sealed in blood. "You have not finished earning it," she said softly. "I know." He smiled. "I will spend the rest of my life trying." Outside the window, the wolves of Astronvale lifted their voices to the golden moon, a song of celebration, of renewal, of a bond that had been tested by betrayal and silence and distance and war, and had emerged not merely intact, but unbreakable. In the great tapestry of Astronvale's history, the weavers would add a new thread. The story of a commoner who walked barefoot onto the proving stone and captured a king's soul. Who fled into the darkness when trust shattered like glass. Who killed a wolf with her father's knife and walked unarmed into an enemy fortress to save 43 strangers. Who howled with the voice of an unborn king and brought a usurper to his knees. The story of a woman who learned that the hardest battle was not fighting enemies or surviving exile or even forgiving the man she loved. The hardest battle was believing she was worth fighting for. She had won that battle, and she would never doubt it again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.